Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Tainted Warriors. I'm Mikey.
I'm Nicole.
And let's just do this week's question first. Because I feel like
before we jump into anything, the question of the week is, if you could trade places with anyone for one day, who would you choose and why? Go Mikey.
Okay, so I chose, I kind of looked at it in a way of, I could pick somebody, like, when I picked them, I wanted to go back to a, time. So I picked Amy Jo Johnson, but I want to switch with her to the time that she played Kimberly Hart, the Pink Ranger, because that's my ultimate fantasy. So for just a day to be like, I really am the Pink, maybe that's what happened. And maybe that's why I've always had such an obsession, because I was the Pink Ranger.
So me, I don't necessarily know who specifically I would choose if the choice really came down to it, but I came up with either Jeff Bezos, because he, not that I really like him necessarily, but he's in all the elite circles, so he's got to have some knowledge that we only have suspicions of. And he's going to go out of the Blue Origin fucking orbit ride around the Earth. So that would be really cool, but I don't know. I may just want to be Jared Isaacman instead, because I read that he's, going to be on the SpaceX Crew Dragon. And that one's going to orbit the Earth for, days versus I think it's, 1 day Jeff Bezos is going, or for, half an hour. It's nothing compared to the other one. So I just basically want to orbit the Earth for 1 day in someone's body.
That would be really cool.
Right?
This week we decided, I guess you could call it a viewer's request.
We actually had a fan recommendation.
There you go.
For this episode that we call Mysterious Disappearances.
Ooh, and we actually both looked a little bit closer into the missing 411 cases. I looked into the very first documentary that was on Hulu that involved 5 cases.
And I looked into another one on Hulu, it was Missing 411, The Hunted, and also I watched a documentary called Vanished on Amazon Prime. And of course, we also Googled a lot of stuff to go along with it. So, I guess to get started, it's kind of important to mention the guy who made all of these documentaries, and he's written a ton of books about these different cases. His name is David Paulides. He was actually a former police detective. Now he's an investigator. I guess when he retired from the police department, 2 rangers had approached him and kind of told him about some suspicious disappearances that they knew of and suggested he look into them, and that's kind of how he got started in all of this. But there's a few points I want to go over, because usually if it's just one person, you might just think okay, this is some psycho. Maybe they just want to make $1. I try to stay a little suspicious if I only have one guy really telling me a bunch of stuff. But obviously, we found Google sources, different news sources to back this stuff up. And B, when you look at the different precautions kind of that he takes, it's actually incredible. So of all the cases he's investigated, in the ones I watched, which was basically, I think for mine, it was mostly just hunters and camping people. I think this was from the Hunted documentary. But he found 12,000 cases that fit a profile that had the following points. So there was a point of separation where the individual breaks off from a group, which of course also happens in Mikey's. A few of these, Mikey, as he was telling me earlier, do happen in his cases also. Mm-hmm. So it's not just adults, it's also children. So there's a point of separation. In a lot of cases, he's found that there's boulder fields present. So, a big-ass cluster of rocks.
I can't even lie. I was like, Boulder Field? I have Boulder County. I wonder if they're in, the same place.
No, so just, rocks and, in a lot of places, there's, granite, I guess, under the rocks, or, granite fields.
Right.
They tend to be near water and take place in the mid to late afternoon. There's usually some kind of weather event, like a snowstorm or, fog that happens close to the disappearance or the start of the search party. Usually, the missing people either have a disability or an illness.
Yeah, that was actually my very first note that I had for the children, was that all of them had shown I wrote it as they either shown a sign or they were fully, like, had a disability or... Yes, it was actually confirmed. A lot of these kids were really young, so I guess it was harder. But then, like,
Right.
throughout their cases, they were a little bit older, so...
Right. So, he has even more profile points, as if that's just not enough.
Right.
Also, a stipulation is canines either couldn't or wouldn't track the scent of the missing people. The victims, if they're found, are usually found in areas that have already been searched. Their personal items, like clothes, shoes, whatnot, that they brought with them, usually that stuff goes missing along with them, and if it is located, it's located somewhere that you wouldn't expect, like miles away from where they disappeared, or sometimes even miles away from the body. Usually if the bodies are found, the cause of death is unknown. And in this case, he's found 59 clusters of missing people fitting this particular profile across the nation. So that's clusters, meaning in each little cluster, there's, 15 plus up to like 50, I think.
Oh, and he's
people.
found like 59 clusters of people?
So the cluster is basically like a group of people that all fit this profile in the same area, and he's found 59 different ones throughout the United States.
That's crazy. I should have looked more into it. Like, that's really
Well,
fascinating.
That's why I wanted to go into this, because
Yeah.
he goes at it from what I view as a police detective kind of angle. So,
right. And I guess and it's crazy because, like, I can back a lot of these because a lot of the children's stories have these common things that, I mean,
right.
My documentary was before hers.
2 years.
So, like, I do believe that there was more information that was coming out afterwards that I have, but I didn't see any of those playing roles so much. I mean, besides the handicap. But it's just crazy once you listen to everything that, yes, a lot of these children follow these same exact casings, profile points.
Right. So if the profile points aren't enough, before he actually calls a case suspicious, he also makes sure that every single case has undergone a thorough search and rescue attempt. So, like, usually there's multiple canine units out, there's helicopters, there's, as many volunteers as possible.
And we do understand that, it's not, the people aren't always, like, trained, skilled people. There are a lot of people that are just
but you have
normal
search dogs. And
well, right, but I was just about to say, though, is that even though you're not trained, you could still have 20,000 people that could link arms and go walking for these child that...
They also, in a lot of the cases, they kind of use grid things. So they would have, like, one person here, they would make a line of people, and the ones on each end would have a rope. They would walk up a certain amount of feet.
Right.
They would walk over and tie it off, and then they would have everyone kind of comb through the area in a line, so there's physically no way to miss something.
Right. Well, that's what I mean, is that they made it pretty much very... almost dummy-proof to be able to help find...
Like, it was extremely thorough.
Yes.
He also makes sure that in every case they rule out criminal activity, so, it's not a case of, like, the mafia just stole the body and ditched it in the river somewhere, crazy shit. They rule out voluntary disappearances, which, to me, that, it goes along with ensuring that the person was mentally stable, which he also does, so, you're not having anyone go into, like, that crazy Japanese forest where all the suicidal people go till they kill themselves. It's nothing like that. And then he makes sure that there's no evidence of an animal attack, because obviously if someone goes missing in the wilderness, that's going to be the first thing you expect. Bears, lions, things like that. But it is important to note that, at least in a lot of my cases, a lot of the people go missing above the tree line on the mountains, according to him, which I guess there's a certain point in altitude where, like, basically trees can't grow and things like that. So you usually don't find a lot of, like, animals and stuff beyond that.
Right.
So, if you're found there, you shouldn't have evidence of an animal attack anyway.
Right.
But it'd be pretty obvious if you did, I would think.
Right.
And then there is a couple interesting notes I just have. This is according to David Paulides. He said neither the Department of the Interior, which oversees the National Park Service, or the Department of Agriculture's U.S. Forest Service keep track of the number of people reported missing in the national park, and that the FBI does not investigate missing adults. Supposedly, they really only investigate certain missing children, like if there's special circumstances. I did find on justice.gov that it said straight up that the FBI assists state and local law enforcement in missing person cases by making FBI lab and FBI identification divisions available. Information pertaining to certain categories of missing people can be entered into the missing person file of the FBI operated National Crime Information Center by local law enforcement. So basically, they give out a couple little departments for help, like the lab, which, you would expect the FBI lab to be more sophisticated than a local law enforcement, be able to get DNA results back better and stuff like that, I'd imagine. So that makes sense, but, they don't really look into anything. They just kind of rely on state and local law enforcement to really do the work.
Reason, right?
Yeah.
Look, and that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's nuts.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of a little background on, David Paulides, our information guy. And
right. And that was really awesome, because like I said, if it wasn't for you actually saying them, those were points that I was noticing while I was looking up and watching the documentary, but it wasn't anything that was being, fully stated,
Right.
hey, I didn't do these searches, or I didn't look into these until this. So with the missing 411, I will say that, yes, I watched the whole document, but a lot of what I wrote down was what I could find on Google. I just figured I would kind of throw in their name and get what actually happened, what maybe have came out after. Did we find anything? In the documentary, it is about 5 children, and I'll just throw a real quick list of their names real quick. There is Dior Coons Jr., who disappeared in 2015. We've got a lot of information about him. There is Bobby Bizup, who disappeared in 1958. There is, I might butcher these next couple names a little, Jared Editero. He disappeared in 1999. These next 2, I don't really have too much about them. So those 3 that I do have, I just gave the quick amount because I do have more about them. But with Samuel Bohelite, he did disappear October 6, 2006, in Crater Lake National Park. And then there was Keith Perkins, who disappeared April 10th, 1952 in Ritter, Oregon. And out of those 5, I do believe that Keith Perkins is the only one to have been found alive. And I think he was gone. I don't want to say for how long. I can't remember. He disappeared. But he was recovered. And he doesn't have any recollection of what happened. He can't recall. So I didn't really do too much looking into him. Like I said, these first 3 were so intriguing. And I do believe that the documentary kind of based the 3 that I looked into as the main characters, if you would want to say, to the story. Yes. In the documentary with Dior Coons Jr., there was nothing found of him. There was nothing came out. I do believe that after the documentary released, and after, we're now in 2001, or 2021, that,
wow.
Some years have went by. I guess I went back in time. So more information has come out about his case.
I'm 11.
Me too. So I'm just going to start it off with Dior Coons Jr. On July 10th, 2015, 2-year-old Dior Coons Jr. was camping up in Timber Lake Campground, which is about 10 miles from Liddor, Idaho. With him was his parents, Jessica Mitchell and Bernal Dior Coons Sr., who I will be referring to as Dior Sr. throughout the rest of my talking. Also was Jessica's grandfather, who would be Dior Jr.'s great-grandfather, and Robert Walton, who was a friend of the grandfather only. Jessica and Dior Sr. did not know him. I don't believe they met him before. The grandfather and him did take trips. They were friends. They met somewhere. They took camping trips before together. So this wasn't unusual for those two to go. And I guess Jessica and them wanted to, like, this was a last minute camping trip that they decided to go up with. I don't think they knew of this friend was planning on going, but they didn't say too much. He did decide to come. So little Dior ends up going around missing at around 2:40 p.m. on that day. The reason for the disappearance is a big miscommunication from what the 3 or 4 suspects are saying. What is happening is they are saying that Jessica and Dior Sr. are going to go fishing down at a stream. That is, they didn't disclose how far away it was, but in the documentary, while Jessica is talking to them, she can say, I see my picnic table from where I'm standing for their campsite and their campfire. So it's not that far away from where this stream is. They were going to go fishing in. As she and Dior Sr. are walking down, Dior Jr., she happens to look, is kind of following them. And so she's turned around, she kind of asks him, hey buddy, do you want to come to the stream with us, or would you like to go stay with Grandpa? I guess he knew Grandpa. I don't know, he was 2 years old, so I'm not sure how articulate he really was. But he did know Grandpa. He knew that word and knew that Grandpa was back at the camp. So he decided to turn around and start walking back. Jessica does claim that she waits to make sure he is not following her anymore or in sight to, like, be able to turn back around, and continue following without her noticing. So she does carry on down to the stream with Dior Sr. Once arriving at the stream, they're maybe there about 5 minutes, if that. They do realize there is a low tide and it's like has caused minnows to end up being stuck in this little pond, I guess is the best way to put it. It's connected to the stream, but it's not like in the stream where they're going to go away. They were trapped. They figured this was perfect. Little Dior loved fish, that they want him to go and see it. So Jessica stays back at the stream as Dior Sr. goes up to grab his son. He calls over to the campground to the grandfather and says, where's my son? And the grandfather looks up and says, he's not with you. And he says, no, we told you that he was going to stay back, which I did find was a little confusing, because he's saying that he told them that Dior was going to stay back. Dior Jr. was staying back, and that he had custody, I guess is the best way to put it, temporary custody for the second of Dior. But the grandfather is saying that no, that conversation never happened. And they do say that Dior was following them at some point. So how did you get it reconfirmed with the grandfather that, you know what I mean, that he was coming back?
Right.
I'm not too sure how that happened, which is why I'm saying that it was a miscommunication. I'm not sure how that happens, or how that, how that did happen. They do claim that because Jessica waits, I think maybe 45 minutes in total before she does make her 911 call, that was a little sketchy. But where they are does not really have good service. They do say that Dior is in his truck trying to call multiple times, and like the call keeps getting dropped, which is why the timing was a little weird. They do look into Jess's, she is very calm for this call. She doesn't seem very panicked. So that was kind of a red flag. But they're just taking the family's word, and it does cause a huge search and rescue to be seen. So in a little, I went back in a little bit later of a story when they do actually interview the grandfather. The grandfather does claim that he did see Dior playing by the stream, and he says that he looks down but he claimed that he never let the child out of his sight. But I do believe that, I don't know if it is the FBI, but police at least do prove or say that he did leave Dior's, well, there's proof that he went to the trailer or whatever. So, he's not fully being able to see, which is how he ends up being missing.
Right.
No, 7 years, nothing is being, has turned up from Dior. So now police are starting to look into it as, did something happen? And, you know, did Dior even make it up to camp? Is now a question. It's so sad to think because, 2 private investigators, not one, 2 private investigators, and I do have the name of one that I'll be bringing up, have been hired by Jessica and Dior Sr. and then fired by Jessica and Dior Sr. because they do believe that they're not cooperating fully with the police. I do have an exact statement from Lynn Bowerman, who I forgot to look up who she actually was. I don't remember if she was the FBI, but this is the reason why I'm saying that. Because in quotation marks, it does say, Mom and Dad are being less than truthful. There are 3 dots because there was a little bit more that kind of explained why they say that, but it was just restating that they've talked to them. So I had to do a ... And it does say, we've interviewed them multiple times, and every time there are changes to the story. Not looking too good.
Right.
What I did explain to Nicole, another thing that did come out was that the jacket of where Jessica and Dior Sr. were stating Dior Jr. was wearing that day was actually turned up to be in their apartment when police end up getting to search it because Jessica and Dior Sr. split and they end up moving from that apartment. I don't know why they didn't bring everything, or, you know, maybe police got in there a little sooner. I'm not too sure, but they do find the camouflage jacket that they have claimed. That is one thing that they say is relevant of the story, is that even though there's been multiple changes, the jacket of what he was wearing was so consistent that if you're going to change everything up, and now they see that this jacket's at home, and they do believe that they're being less than truthful. There was the private investigator is Philip Klein. He was the second PI to be hired, then fired by the parents, pretty much after concluding that the family was the number 1 suspect. So they hire him. He starts looking into everything. Since they hired him, he's kind of like, he's got to tell them what he's finding. So he's kind of like giving them little hints of like, hey, I'm starting to feel like you guys are a suspect here. They fire him. And they even try to sue him. And I do believe there was 3 attempts of them taking him to court. And by the 3rd time that they did get to court, the investigator won. So, you got to take everything that I find with little bits of grain of salt. And this is all not mentioned in the documentary, because up to the point of the documentary, I do believe they didn't know any of this. That wasn't coming out. They did do some interviews, and I did find it was a little weird because Jessica's best friend is actually complying and telling the story. And during her talking, she gets a phone call, and it is somebody stating that, like, Jessica is very upset that you're doing this. She doesn't like it. And Dior Sr. ends up showing up at the friend's house and is talking like, oh, Jess isn't confrontational. She doesn't know how to handle pressure or something like that. And that's my job. I need to make sure that everything is okay in this. And that he's saying to the friend, like, you didn't do anything wrong. This is my responsibility. Okay, that could be taken in a lot of different ways.
Right.
I didn't mean to jump off course, but I do want to also throw in this little tidbit. The second private investigator, Klein, he was, I guess, rehired by other family members to look further into Jessica and Dior Sr. And I'm not sure if he found this information, but it was now coming out with Jessica stating after they have broken up or not together anymore that she could have been afraid that Dior Sr. could have hurt Dior Jr. But evidence is also proving that Jessica is more than capable too, and that she was not fully a very happy mother. She did have 2 other children prior that got taken away with the father, biological father. So, they kind of looked into that. How, you didn't want your 2 other children. How are you going to feel about a 3rd one?
Right.
There wasn't much of a change. Justice was trying to say, like I said, as of right now, they are still free. So there isn't enough evidence to say that they actually did anything. I still don't believe that there is a body for Dior. But police are believing that there might be more foul play. And the other backing evidence is that even though they did ask, like, okay, did Dior even make it up there? The friend of the grandfather that I did mention earlier, he did come out and state that, yes, Dior was up at camp with them that day. He ran around the fire pit. They do say that they go into town, not the friend, but just Dior Sr. and Dior Jr. do go into town prior to his missing to grab some
supplies?
Yeah, to grab some supplies. There was a clerk that did for a while say that she did see a mother and a child at about 1 o'clock, but then has now came out and said that actually that might have been at 6 o'clock, which doesn't add up.
Different.
Right, and then if it's at 6 o'clock, Dior was already missing at this point. There's already a search for him, so it wouldn't have been him. If it was the 1 o'clock, then that would have helped Jessica's alibi.
Right.
But now because they're stating that it was 6 o'clock, it's kind of a crushing. And like I said, they do say that this could have either been an accident or a cover-up. And I guess I can see that. But during the documentary, it does seem, like I said, a lot of this other information did not come out yet. So it was very weird for 7 years to not have anything come out, to not find a body, to not have blood anywhere. Nothing was coming out.
It's still weird.
It is very weird.
They have a suspect.
Right, they do believe, but it's crazy. Because like I said, if it is the mother, or the father, let's say, perhaps, but they don't have anything, there's no evidence against them criminally. And we're talking just in 2015. We're not talking in 1958, which brings us to our next person, who is Bobby Bishop. He is age 10. I do want to touch back a little bit because I wasn't sure what Dior's signs were remember our handicap discussion?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what they were stating, like what his claims were, or I don't know. I don't want to be rude. Right. So I'm not sure what made them believe he could have had anything. But with Bobby, he was full-blown, almost full-blown deaf. So I guess if that makes sense, I'm not sure what made them believe Dior had anything. But, Bobby was on there because he was deaf. Right. If that kind of makes sense.
I see what you're saying.
He is, like I said, 10 years old. He goes to Camp St. Malo in Boulder County, which goes back to our funny little joke earlier. He was last seen by a camp counselor, then was never seen again. Nicole was just trying to look up.
I was trying to see if he was, what his disability
was. What his disability was for me. And actually, she just finds that there was found remains
near where he was last seen.
But they are not human. So they are not confirming still that Dior Jr. has been found. But something has been found by the site where he was last seen.
There's no human DNA, but they don't say what it was, so that's kind of weird.
That is very, very weird.
That was on March 20th of 2020, guys.
Whoa, that was... Well, thank you for that.
I don't know. I still don't know if he had a disability or anything, but
So with Bobby, and like I was saying, in the documentary when I was watching it, they do state that there was a counselor that does go up to Bobby to say, "Hey Bobby, it is dinner time." The counselor is claiming to Bobby walks with him, you know, and of course when you're walking, he didn't walk. Bobby wasn't in front. Bobby was following behind. So like I guess maybe let's say every 30 steps, maybe that's too much, but the counselor was looking behind her, hearing for her. He looks, sees Bobby, everything's good. Next thing you know, maybe 10 steps in, he realizes he doesn't hear anything anymore. He turns back around, not there. Bobby is gone. So, the search is on for him. With him being deaf, they are believing that it is harder. Where the conflicting stories that when I looked into this, they do state that there was no counselor that was actually like guiding Bobby back, and that they felt like nobody, since he was deaf, he couldn't hear people calling for him, so he kind of just wandered. With that being said, Bobby's remains were discovered nearly a year later high on the east face of Mount Meeker. No official autopsy was done, and this is kind of crazy, I guess, but we also have to remember this is 1958. During that time, the coroner just concluded the cause of death is quotation marks, probably from exhaustion and exposure. Now,
probably.
Years later, coming down the road, it is found out now that two counselors that were working at Camp St. Malo, went on to be credibly accused of sexual abusing multiple boys. One of the names is Neil Hewitt, who was not only just working at the time of his disappearance, okay? That's already a kind of a big thing. Like, you've been accused now of touching multiple boys, and now you've been on there on that date. He is also the counselor that found Bobby's remains this year later. And I do believe a trench that was already searched, or in a spot that was already searched a year later.
They don't think they're going to check there again, but...
And, once again, I can't remember if during the documentary, if it is the counselor, if it is him that is telling the story about Bobby and that is stating that, Bobby followed him. But if it is him, like I said, that came out first. So that could have been him trying to clear his name. Because now, with this breaking stuff, and at least I found this stuff out, it was from 2019. All he has to say is that I did nothing to harm that little boy. Okay, but you were so willing to 2 years ago, talk a little bit more. Tell us what happened. Right. Why are you now becoming so reclusive? Because, maybe you feel like we're a little bit more hotter on your trail?
Especially because I feel like as time goes on, a lot of people have, memories, come back. Isn't that a thing that people say?
You're right, yes, because you can black stuff out for a while and block stuff out for a while in your head, but the tall-tale heart is, the best Edgar Allan Poe type, feeling of, yes, I buried that heart, and now I can hear it beating in my sleep. So is it that type of situation? My other thing is, though, is that nobody is being charged. So I do want to also state that, is that I don't believe there's enough evidence to charge them. So this still doesn't disclaim them or make anybody guilty that they did it. There still are possibilities that it is other things, extraterrestrial, even, could be. And the reason why I'm also stating that is because in my last one that, like I said, I did look into, who was Jared Editiro, he is 3 years old, and he actually ends up going missing on Big South Trail in the Roosevelt National Forest, about 60 miles west of Fort Collins, which is located, this is all in Colorado, on October 2nd, 1999. Jared's father, I can't lie, I don't know why I did not write his name down. I just now realized
I do that
was
too.
so stupid of me. Was part of a Christian single network group, which was all up in the area for a trip. Not sure why or if they lived there. Like, if they lived there, I don't imagine that they lived there because, like I said, it was a resort. You know, they do resort. They keep saying that it's as a resort.
Right.
So, this group of 11 people, and including, these are 11 adults, I do believe, because they also say that Jared's sister was going on a hike to the hatchery. So Jared's father actually wasn't going to let Jared go until he heard that they were only going to go to the hatchery. But I just realized that I ruined that already by deciding where Jared actually went missing, because, as I just said, that's not where they actually end up going. After they bring somebody else's child, let me just say that again, bring somebody else's child who was already reluctant to let you go 15 miles further and go to a trail called Big South Trail. So, like I said, the 11 members decide to go to there. The trail's 15 miles away from the resort. Don't understand why. There's still to this day, nobody can say why they decided to not go where they were going to go when they decided to go there. During the hike, though, the group does split up into two groups. There is a faster paced walking group and a slower paced walking group that was going. And the reason why I state this is because the two fishermen that have last claimed to have seen Jared say, like I said, they claim to see Jared, but he's alone. And this didn't raise a flag, though, to them, because they did see at least one group about 40, 50 yards. I don't know how is football field 1 yard?
A football field is 100 yards.
Okay, so yeah, still then about 40 or 50 yards away. I didn't want it to sound like too crazy. But yeah, so they were like, okay, he's got to be with that group. He's just a little bit ahead. The only thing that the fishermen couldn't decipher is if this group that Jared was ahead of was either the fast-paced group or was he part of the slow-paced group, which I guess could have made a difference. You know, because if they knew that if he was all the way farther ahead of everybody, then maybe the fishermen would have said something.
Right.
But, you know, if they're thinking that, okay, he's with that group and there's still another group too, that, you know, somebody's going to realize.
In front of and in back of him.
Yes, so that he would be fine. But like I said, that's not actually what happens at all. Two members that have been looking for Jared, they look for him for about 45 minutes and then decide, we're going to go back to Jared's father's resort and tell him. And they start out, so now it's been an hour, and they tell him to sit on down because something happened to Jared. Now, in his own words, he's thinking like Jared's hurt and they had to go to the hospital. So once they say Jared's missing, and he says, oh, is he okay or something like that, they said, yeah, he's fine. We just can't find it.
How do you know he's fine?
Exactly. And like, I guess it just makes no sense because why would you wait such a long time? Right. That's not your child. I guess maybe if it was your child, I could understand, you know, you're not going to get help, but
right.
This is somebody else's child. I think if I lost someone's child within the first 5 minutes, I'm going to go tell their parent. You know, I might feel guilty, but I'm going to go and tell their parent. I need as many eyes as I can, you know,
True.
on them. So, I do have a lot of the information from when the stuff started to reappear from Jared's, from what he was wearing and missing. I'm not sure about the dates, how long it was. I have a couple dates, but they're a little misleading. So I do just want to, I won't say how many days it was. But it is come now to find out Jared's shoes were found, but it was just one shoe. And this shoe was in such pristine condition. Now, they were saying that if there was a mountain lion attack, either because it was on like a rock by boulders, that if Jared was grabbed by the mountain lion at that point to have taken off his shoe, it would have rubbed up against the rock and there would have been vertical like marks or something. Yes. but there was none either going up or down or to the side of the shoe. So there's nothing to state that he was grabbed or ripped abruptly from his shoe.
Right.
Next piece of evidence to have been found was his pants. His pants are found pulled inside out, and there is part of like a missing leg. But once you look further into, like, I don't know how they concluded it, but they did realize that none of that is from an animal actual attack. It is all from birds using the material to nest, and from natural weathering, from how long that piece of fabric sat out there. However, whatever they used to make that sweatpant, however long it sat out, I guess it, like, deteriorates or whatever.
Yeah, everything deteriorates.
His jacket is found, like I said there too, but it is found with a puncture wound, like puncture mark, but there's no blood. No blood. Once again, if something attacked you, it's that, like, in the shoulder, either, like...
Especially a kid.
Yeah. I do believe there'd be blood anywhere. Anywhere. There's no blood mark going up the mountain. There's nothing. But except for these puncture wounds, which now that I think about it and I say it, like, so is it a vampire? You know what I mean, though?
Sucking
Like,
blood.
Yeah, like, I mean, how else did you not get any blood anywhere? His skull and molar tooth, I know I just, like, literally jumped and went wicked left on that because I started out really late. But those two things were also found too. The only two things found of him. But those were found at a 9,120 foot elevation. Okay? You can look online if you do type it up. There is a topical map. I couldn't for some reason pull it up to see what that meant. So I don't know if they're stating that it went up 9,120 feet higher than where Jared was last seen, or if they're stating like that was the actual elevation that Jared was at, you know what I mean, like of the grounds,
right,
of where he. But either way, I do find that to be very crazy. And there was also there was a aerial search. So Jared's search and rescue team actually caused, like, it was such a big thing from back then that it caused one of the biggest, like, search and rescue teams actually. And there was even going to be a helicopter that was going to search this very mountain, but it crashed before it could get up there. And so it never actually did. So it's like, once again, it kind of goes into what Nicole was stating earlier with all the facts and the, those bullet points of, like, these cases all, even though they're not done at the same exact place, they do have a lot of very things in common. And yes, I did just pull up a lot of what, happened afterwards and how there could have been actual suspects or whatever to that. But like I said, they're not concluded. So as of right now, a lot of these kids are still either missing or, like, they don't have what I stated as, like, actual conclusions. You know what I mean?
They don't have concrete evidence to say one way or the other.
Yes.
What happened.
Yes. So they are still missing. So it still follows into that category of what really could have happened. It could have been anything.
Now, I'm going to take you into some adults that go missing. Because I feel like when you hear about children go missing, you're a little more dismissive as to what it could be. Because children are, I mean, let's be real, in the wilderness by themselves, they are prey. Like, not to sound mean or anything,
well,
but
like
they cannot protect themselves.
Well, like you just had a 2-year-old. What's a 2-year-old going to do to a mountain lion?
Right. It's going to be like, that's a big kitty, and either just chill and try to hide, maybe it'll try to run, or it's going to go try to pet it. Either way, there's nothing it can do.
Right.
So, but adults have gone missing too, and I'm going to dive into that right here. So the first guy I have listed, his name is John Neza. He disappeared July 17th, 1965. It was on Mount Shasta. He had climbed that mountain numerous times before, to the point where people considered him a premier climbing expert of that mountain. Yet somehow he goes up for a hike, or I think it was a hike, and ends up never returning. So they send the search party with helicopters and all that to look. They never find his body, his gear, or his clothes. I don't have follow-ups on everybody like Mikey does. I do have a couple, but I just kind of have like details about some of the people. He was just a little general one, kind of a starting point, but also in the same area, we have Carl Landers. On 3 p.m. May 1st of 1999, he and two friends headed up Mount Shasta. They were going to go hiking. I believe it was hiking. But they go up to a spot called 50/50 where they plan to camp overnight. And in the morning, something happened where the two friends were basically packing up to camp, and they told Carl he could go ahead to Lake Helen, which was off in the distance a little bit. I don't remember how far away exactly it was, but you could see it. There was basically a clear line of sight between where he was leaving and where he was going. There weren't any like obstacles in the way. It's not like there were any like cliffs or anything like that. He was literally just basically walking almost a straight line up the mountain. But when they get there, they never find Carl. So his body was never found. He just kind of vanished. And it wasn't like he was an unphysical guy. He had been part of an outdoor like hiking and running group known as the Roadrunners. And they actually went jogging 6 mornings a week. So, like, this guy was physically fit. He knew what he was doing. Next, I have Dale Stelling. He's kind of interesting. It was 2013. He was with his parents and his wife at Mesa Verde Park. It was around 4:15, and he decided he was going to go to a place called the Spruce Tree House Cliff Dwelling, which was less than 0.25 miles away. Like, it was a curvy road to get there. But as he went around the bends, his wife could still see him, so she could kind of see when he was basically arriving to where he was supposed to be. Like, literally right around the corner, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So she sees him go around the last bend and then, loses sight of him as he should be pretty close to his destination. And obviously he ends up going missing. That's the last time she sees him. The next day, the park had been searching for him, and they actually got in touch with a witness. The person had taken a photograph of her dad, and off on the side was Dale. And what was crazy about it is they were on the other path. So he was supposed to basically curve to the left down this one path to the cliff dwelling, and ends up going to the right down what's called Petroglyph Trail. And it was called that because there were these basically like engraved art into the sides of the cliffs, like the rocks that were like little, almost like space people. I think that's what they actually called them. But it was made by the Anasazi people, which were an ancient group of people that actually created that trail. But he wasn't supposed to be on that trail. Like, that's a 2.4 mile long trail that ends up looping around back to the parking lot. And it's much longer than the 0.25 mile walk that he told his wife he was going on.
Right, to go from like a 0.25 mile walk to a 2.5 mile walk, is that what you just said?
2.4, yeah.
Like, you literally just almost like 10 times your destination.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I don't believe that, like, those are such two extremes. Like,
you
need more for that type of a walk, I guess, than you do for a 0.2 mile.
Right, he didn't even bring a bottle of water with him because if you're only going, I believe it was him that didn't bring water, because if you're only going right there, why are you going to bring water? You're going to move right back. It's a 10-minute walk. It was not even, I don't think. I don't really know.
That, right?
That came from the Vanished documentary that I watched on Amazon Prime. But the reason I say that is because I actually, I also popped him into Google, see if any new information was up. His body was actually found on September 17th of 2020 in a remote section of the park, 4.2 miles away from where he'd last been seen. The area took crews 2 hours to reach and had also been searched when he went missing in 2013. They did find his license and credit cards and everything with him, which is how they knew it was him, because it had his information on it. But they don't suspect foul play or any animal attacks. They said his remains were just bones, so it's going to be basically impossible to determine the cause of death, most likely. And the bones were actually bleached, which I guess happens naturally because of the sun. So after 7 years, they didn't know if it would be possible to get DNA, but if they could, it would take at least a year for results. So that's the latest information on him missing. But again, there's no obvious cause of death for him either. So,
or obvious reason why he was so
over
went so
4
far
miles
away.
Right. and again ends up in an area that was already searched when he went
That
missing.
was like, that really blew my mind. Like when I found that out in that one, I was like, an area that was already searched. Like, how do you don't overlook something like that?
Right. And like pretty much every case I saw about these, when we say that they were searched, these are like top to bottom searches, grid format. Like they literally go through every section. Like they make sure they can see the feet of the person next to them.
And like Nicole was saying, there's not only just the grid of in people. There's dogs, canine units. There's the helicopters, and like it's not just a rinkety dinkety 10 people going out and calling your name. There's so much to these searches that I find it very discreditable for it to be overlooked in an area that was already searched.
Right. So that's just kind of like 3 general people, not necessarily had any specific skills. I mean, I guess you could say that kind of, at least John Nezza was pretty skilled if he was called the premier climber. But, like, these are just normal people. So, I'm going to take you a little bit farther, because you're like, okay, children go missing, yeah, adults go missing. Who would you not expect to go missing, though? Your hikers, your trained hikers, people that go camping all the time, that know survival skills, and your hunters, your people that are constantly in the woods all day long and memorize these woods because they go hunting all the time with their friends.
Make their own claim in the wood. You know what I mean? Like leave their own type of scents and stuff. Like that's how deep they are into this.
They have tree stands and all that set up. Like they don't play.
Right.
They are the beast.
And they don't. And I guess I don't know what you're about to say, but I will just I don't know much about hunting. But I can just say this, though. Before you go hunting, or once you do, you go to the same spot, or you do travel. Like, you do tend to, like, go to the same spot multiple times and look it out.
I actually learned because my dad basically just got into hunting in the recent years. So I learned that you actually get permits to go hunting, but the permits are for different zones. So it depends on what zone you get. And then you go to that specific area. I don't know if you can get multiple, but then you go to that specific area and you're allowed to hunt within that area. You can't necessarily go hunt wherever you want.
Oh.
I mean, you could, but it's illegal. At least in New York State, you have to hunt in the zone.
Okay. See, so it even kind of ties you down even more to where, like...
I think it's for population.
This is where, basically. That's awesome.
So we don't wipe out too many deer in one spot, and then you have a whole Dane over here just destroying everyone's yards or whatever. Right. So, you wouldn't expect these people to go missing, and if they did, you would expect that they would know how to leave signs, right? Wrong. We got a bunch of them here for you. Let's start with Mel Nadell. It was September 6th of 2009. He took a 2-hour drive to Elk Mountain. Obviously, he was going to go hunt some elk. He arrived around 4 p.m. It is a little important to note that a couple days earlier, he had a slight injury to his knee, so he could still, like, walk and, do stuff, but he really couldn't walk as far as normal. So he meets up with 2 of his friends, and the 2 friends end up walking a little bit further up the mountain where they're going to, basically take their spot to hunt. And he stays back, I think they said 150 yards roughly away from where they had parked a Jeep. I think it was a Jeep. But eventually his friends returned to the car. The sun was going down. They had agreed to meet there at sundown or whatever. And they find that their friend Mel is not there. They go to where he's supposed to be, look around, like there's no sign of this dude anywhere. So eventually, they call into the Rangers. They try to get some help to find him. Search and rescue comes out with canines. The canines can only track his scent to where he was expected to be and then no further. So it's like he made it to his destination and then vanished into thin air. He had a bow, a pistol, and other personal effects that were with him, but those were missing, like a whole fucking bow with his arrows. A fucking pistol, like the shit's just missing. But he did have a GPS tracker that was left in his Jeep. And from what I found, I didn't see anything indicating that his body has ever been found. So we have no idea where he went, if he's dead, anything like that. Another suspicious disappearance. Moving on to the next guy, we have Stanley Vigil. He went missing on November 7th of 2017. He went missing 10 miles from where Mel Nadell disappeared.
What?
The dude earlier.
That's
that I just
crazy.
mentioned. Yes. So Stanley, he was driving with his family in the car, and a deer actually crossed their path. So he gets out of the car with his gun, and I think it was a gun, and he basically runs out following the deer because he's a hunter. He wants to shoot it. They said suddenly a fog rolled in, and next thing they knew, there were no signs of Stanley. He just vanished. So the canines couldn't find any scent of him. They couldn't track him at all. And then 5 months later, an off-duty police officer and his son find Stanley's body. His body had skull injuries, 2 broken ribs, and it was 9 miles from where he disappeared. So I don't think they had a specific cause of death listed for that either, because I didn't write it down. I imagine I would have wrote that down. But basically, like, it's just weird that, like, you have these injuries, but you can't tell me, like, oh, he was murdered. Like, it's a homicide. It was this animal. Like, if it was an animal, I don't think you would just have skull injuries and 2 broken ribs. I think your whole body would be pretty messed up, pretty mangled. You know what I mean? Like, what's going to just attack your head and your ribs?
But there won't be any blood.
Right. Like, it's ridiculous. So I put those 2 in there because they were literally so close to each other, and, like...
Yeah, that's really cool.
Right. 5 months it takes you to find the body, like, that's one of the quicker ones. But next we have Audrey Kaplan, and if I remember right, she and the 2 I just mentioned were all in Santa Fe, like around Santa Fe.
Right.
Audrey Kaplan I have listed. She went missing July 30th, 2014 from Ski Santa Fe. If I wrote that right, maybe. Sorry if I did not. Her and her husband, they went to pick mushrooms. So, like, they went on basically hikes and, like, did stuff like this a lot. But they end up getting separated. She ends up vanishing. Thunderstorms end up coming in later on. Because, remember, there's often weather associated. And then, so they end up doing their searches. They don't find anything. No signs of where she could be. Until days later, when one searcher, who was actually off of the primary search grid, finds a destroyed camping site, and then sees a deceased woman in a fetal position. She was naked, and I believe she was naked. I didn't write that, but I'm almost 100% positive she was naked. But the body was on its side, and the face was in 4 to 5 inches of creek water. Now, here's what's a little weird, though. They obviously did an autopsy on her, right? The coroner said that there were no specific findings indicating that she had hypothermia, but the victim also had no fatal diseases, and the circumstances support cold exposure due to low nighttime temperatures. So, essentially, he stated that there's no injuries, no physical symptoms of hypothermia, and he claimed that she had not drowned, and there was no indication her face had been in the water also. So, like, the crime scene showed her face in water. So basically he's saying she didn't drown and her face wasn't in the water, but we have evidence that she was. And he's saying that, she died of hypothermia because of the circumstances and because of the fact that she had no fatal diseases, but you're saying there's no physical evidence that she had hypothermia either. So
oh yeah, that makes no sense.
You're contradicting your own report. So how? That's a suspicious death. I'm sorry, but when you're gonna say basically that's circumstantial. You said she died off the circumstantial evidence of knowing she was out at night. You use that to say she got cold and did all this shit. You know what I mean?
Right, but you can't. Her body didn't go into hypothermia, so how's
that? But you're saying there's literally no specific findings indicating hypothermia.
That's weird.
How? Like, it doesn't make sense.
No.
So, oh my god, what is that name? I can't read my writing. Oh. Frida Lehner. She went missing in Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont in 1950. I don't have the exact date. But she was going to go for a hike with her cousin and ended up falling into a stream. So she told her cousin to wait for her while she ran back to the camp real quick because if they were still nearby, she was going to go change and then meet up with her cousin and, do their hike. Eventually, the cousin goes back to the camp because she's like, yo, bitch is taking a minute. What's up? But the cousin goes back and finds that Frida had vanished. Like, she never made it back to camp. They did hold a search I'm guessing these mountains are somewhere near Connecticut also, because they held a search from Connecticut to Vermont. They used the U.S. Army, the Massachusetts National Guard, the Connecticut Coast Guard, 400 volunteers. Pretty sure they used like helicopters and dogs also. And they never found any trace of her. 6 months later, they find the body near Somerset Reservoir, which they had already searched and was an open area. And they still have no clues on her cause of death after finding the body. Right? Now we have a family. So a family that, is used to going camping and being out in the wilderness, It's the Cowden family. It was Labor Day weekend in 1974. They disappeared from the mountains near Applegate, Oregon, from their campsite. The site was supposedly undisturbed, as if they had just abruptly left. Later, people thought maybe they were abducted. I don't know if they meant like by a UFO or just like a crazy person.
Right.
But, I always think aliens.
I went to a crazy person, but I did go to aliens right after. Like, I mean, because I do believe. Well, because quick little thing though. If you want to get technical, they said it's undisturbed, and I do feel that if you're being abducted by a person, you're not leaving that undisturbed.
That's true. That is true. Unless maybe you're sleeping and get you when you're drug you real quick. That's true. Possible, but
it is possible. But I feel like it's slimmer though. Like,
it's really weird to have an undisturbed site and like a whole family.
Right, because there's more than one person that I can understand. Like, you just got drugged or something, but you drugging a whole family without one person waking up first.
It was a father and mother and I think 2 kids. So yeah, they do an extensive search as always, but they end up finding nothing. Until April of 1975, so about a year later, I think. I don't know when Labor Day is. Like 7 months later, I think. Labor Day, I think, is in September, so in April. 7 or 8 months later, they find the bodies. I forgot who, but someone finds the bodies 100 feet from their fucking campsite. 100 feet. The father, Richard, was tied to a tree. The wife and kids were in a cave that had rocks sealing the entrance. And supposedly there was a guy who was already in jail named Dwayne Lee Little, who confessed to a different inmate in prison that he had killed them. But there was no conviction for him, and the case still remains open. So, if he killed them, why are we not just adding that to his sentence real quick? You know what I mean? He confessed. He's clearly willing to confess. But if you don't have evidence, you're not going to convict him, are you?
Right.
But it's so fucking weird that a year later you find the bodies 100 feet from the campsite, and the wife and kids are sealed in a cave, and the dad's just on a tree, tied to a tree.
Was there a search and rescue? Did you see if there was a part?
Yeah, they did an extensive search and rescue, and they didn't find
and 100 feet. No way.
From the campsite.
No.
100 feet. I forgot who it was. Someone, I think it might have been just a guy, an average guy and his girlfriend going for a hike or something. Just saw his fucking skeleton, a man's skeleton, on a tree. Tied to a tree.
And you're telling me they didn't sue when they were first looking for him? No.
Right? It's ridiculous. That's insane. And then this guy is honestly, my favorite, I think. His name is Aaron Hodges. He went missing September 5th of 2014 in what they call the Crazies Mountains in Montana. He went there with 2 friends. They arrived around 11 a.m. on September 3rd. They had 3 horses and 1 mule, which the mule I believe they were using to help get their supplies up also in addition to the horses. There were 3 of them, so of course they're riding horses. Basically they were going up trails you couldn't drive on, so they're on the horses. Near what was called Campfire Lake, Aaron's horse that he was on actually got spooked for some reason, and it ended up tossing a lot of his supplies, so he didn't have the shit that he brought with them. They end up reaching their destination, and Aaron goes on further. He leaves his 2 friends behind, and he continues on because there's a place called Sunset Lake where his friend had basically buried a cache of supplies, so in the event something like this happened, you go up there and still survive. So Aaron was going to go and basically raid his stash. Eventually, the friends are like, yo, where is this guy? He should have been back by now. It's not that far away. And they call him on a GPS-enabled walkie-talkie. But the GPS actually shows that Aaron had turned away from the path that would take him to the storage and was going down a completely different trail. Basically the same way Dale Stelling had in the Mesa Verde part. So eventually, a snowstorm hits and it drops 18 to 24 inches of snow within 12 hours, and then the search starts after that. They don't see any footprints in the snow to indicate that he was ever there. Stuff starts melting as they're doing the search because it's warming up throughout the day, so they're not seeing anything where they would have expected him to be. Obviously, they're doing the search and they're going towards the place where the last GPS ping hit. They continue on down that same path because obviously they're thinking, okay, he's going the wrong direction. Maybe he continued on. And they eventually find his boots, which are just found sitting upright by a bench. Literally, you just took off your boots and set them there. They continued even further down the path. I don't know. I don't have the distances, but when they put the little map up, it looked like a pretty decent hike, Mm-hmm. It looked like probably double the distance between where he would have gone to his storage between his boots and this next spot. They find his water bladder, which I guess is just basically a drink bag. They find a fire pit that has a partially burnt cigarette container. Aaron was a smoker. And they find a partially burnt fire bundle. And then they find the 2 waistbands from his backpack in the fire pit. So when you have a camping backpack, a lot of them have an extra band that wraps around your waist, or a couple bands that wrap around. Mm-hmm. For some reason that had been cut off his backpack and they were in the fire pit. The same spot where they found this burnt stuff and his water bladder and everything had been searched 1 to 2 days before, and the items weren't there. There were no hits on any scent of him from the canines. And now we're going to fast forward to 9 months later, June 22nd, 2015. There's some farmers working on the fence, a few miles away. And one of the farmers looks down and he sees an orange vest and a backpack leaning up against the tree. Lo and behold, the license is still in the backpack, confirming that it belongs to Aaron. And there's also snack bars, his gun, and his bow is there. Go figure. Yep. But snack bars would indicate that he made it to that storage cache.
Right.
So he did go to his destination, but for some reason, instead of turning and going home, or back to the spot where his friends were, he just went down the other path, is what it sounds like to me, what I gathered.
Right.
Yeah. So, nearby from there, from where they found all that crazy stuff, the water bladder and everything, it was a little bit up farther. The cops actually find a boulder that has a travel mug sitting there. The lid is off of it, and it's got a Monster Energy drink next to it also. So he was just sitting on this boulder enjoying a Monster Energy. But as you're at that boulder, you can see buildings and safety from there. So if he were lost, he would have known where, he would have been able to find a path to this.
To at least see, where I could go.
Yeah, he would have been able to go to a town or something, whatever the civilization was, and be like, I need help. So on August 8th of 2016, I didn't write down the name, but it was some kind of dude ranch, I'm assuming was somewhere near all this. There was a guest that found a human skull under a tree. PD comes, they find the skull, pelvis, femur, cell phone, and jacket, but they don't find any pants or socks because they found no feet. They find no broken bones, no cause of death, and Aaron's remains are 11 miles from the original campsite where he left his friends, and 6 miles away from his boots. They never recovered the information from his cell phone either, so we have no idea what happened during any of that. Because if you're lost, I'm sorry, you're probably going to be doing something on your phone. You're going to be trying to call.
Right, well, my question is there a reason why they didn't do, why they couldn't retrieve anything? Or
I didn't see the reason why, but I'm guessing, it was basically something it was so damaged. Maybe the snow got into it and made it wet or something like that.
Okay.
But maybe my brother's just skilled, but this aids in my conspiracy thoughts because when my house burned down, my older brother my laptop melted. I told Mikey this, but my laptop melted. He didn't have the heart to tell me that he didn't think he could retrieve the information, so he took it anyway. And he's like, I'll see what I can do, and I'll do my best. And a week later, he had gotten every important file I needed off of my fried hard drive and onto a new one. So, I just don't understand sometimes how, if it's not destroyed, if it's like okay, how can we not retrieve anything?
Well, that's what made me wonder, because I was like, well, was it, a choice for them not to do that? Did they decide, like, maybe that wouldn't be such useful information? But I feel like that's
all I can
crazy.
think is that it got wet because of the snow.
Right.
Or something. But I don't really know, because there's no broken bones. Like, it's not obvious you were beaten or anything, so...
That's
I don't
true.
understand why your phone would be destroyed if everything else is
Whoever took
okay.
his feet probably smashed his phone.
Right? Where are your feet, bro? Your boots are by a bench, and then there's no feet.
I mean, not to sound crazy, but I mean, inside of the boots, they obviously looked, though, right? There's no feet,
Yeah, I think I even saw a picture, and it was literally just boots just chilling next to a bench. Like, okay. Like, I took them off, and I'm going to go walk in the stream.
I feel like your feet aren't something that's fatty enough to where, like, an animal would only eat them. You know what I mean? Like, I would assume that they would go for, like...
they'd eat your feet last, because it's all bone.
It's just a lot of bone.
Yeah. I don't know. So that's my favorite guy, because, like, that's just such an intense story. Like, we find his body, and we still have no answers. So...
Yeah.
This next thing I have written down is just kind of... It's a weird thing. These guys didn't go missing. They didn't die. But... it could kind of be, like, maybe an explanation for what could be taking these people, or I don't even know. It's really weird. And the only reason that I'm talking about it, and the only reason it even made it into the Missing 411 Hunted documentary that I watched, is because these people actually had a video of what they were hearing. So there were these two guys. They were at the Sierra camp, which I guess to get to that, it's like an 8-mile hike. There's a 4,000-foot elevation change to get there, so it's not for the light of heart. Like, you need to know what you're doing to get there. I believe it's also one of those things where you have to, like, walk or take some kind of, like, weird animal. I don't think you can get there by anything with wheels. So I showed Mikey this video earlier.
That's really cool.
These guys made a shelter out of, like, logs and trees. There were a couple trees standing, and it looked like they took, like, just tree logs from fallen trees or something, and put them up to make, like, walls and a door, and, like, there was not a lot of space between them. Like, maybe, like, little animals could get through, but if you had anything that could hurt you, it wouldn't have really been able to get through unless it could either somehow move the logs or...
Yeah, it would have had to have taken down your whole container, or your whole shelter.
Right. So it was a pretty fancy shelter. And these guys end up hearing these strange noises and locking themselves in the shelter. And it was like 1971. They actually had a video camera. I think it was recording in night vision because it looked like that green-black thing. You don't see anything in the video, but what you hear is absolutely insane.
Unexplainable.
Like, the best way I could write down to describe it is, at first it kind of sounds almost like a dog howling. And then, I don't remember the order, but you hear, like, grunting. You hear what sounds like crazy yelling in some kind of foreign gibberish language, like, not a human language, something that you never heard.
Jabberwocky.
Fucking Chewbacca.
Right.
But, I don't know, you hear all these weird sounds, and it almost sounds like there's a male and a female. The two men were actually trying to mimic the sounds, and it almost seemed like as they did that at first maybe the creatures are getting irritated or like talking back to them, like, who the fuck are you to talk to me? But then it almost seemed like the creatures were conversing between, maybe like the female was like, hey,
calm down. Right. It's crazy there's another one, because I feel like there was only supposed to be like two. And I mean, I don't know where you were going to say, but I do want to jump in, and anytime, if you go and watch this video, anytime, you will directly be able to tell when it is the guys that are making the noise and when it is the creature that is making the noise.
Yeah, you can tell.
It sounds way further away. It is nothing that can be remade.
Yeah, so they did a video analysis on this to basically make sure it was legit. And what they found was that, A, the vocals were not altered or pre-recorded. They weren't re-recorded. Like, nothing was altered in regards to the vocals. They confirmed that there were two of these creatures that basically seemed to be conversing back and forth, but that you could also hear the hiker overlapping with them as well as he mimicked the sounds, which is kind of, I guess that's consistent with not being faked as well. I guess that would be harder. I don't really know the details on that. I'm not that much of a pro in audio editing. But the voice analyst also concluded that this creature was larger than a human man and would stand anywhere from 7'3" to 8 foot in height. And they did confirm it. I probably already said it, but it confirmed also that there was more than one of these unknown creatures.
Yeah.
So, in 2014, I thought it was a little weird because the U.S. Forest Service actually discovers this camp for the first time and forces the hunters to move their stove and dismantle the shelter. So basically, they had to tear apart the camp. Which is really, so like 43 years later, you're gonna be like, you need to take this down? How does that make any sense? But, I don't know, those two men, again, the only reason I'm really adding them in, because they didn't disappear, there's no weird thing as far as that goes here. But they have a video of this, so you can literally hear it, and like it's supposedly confirmed not to be faked.
Right.
So,
I guess to go back to the voice analysis thing real quick, the way that I feel like he could probably tell is like, you can get pitches and you can put them down on paper and their vibrations and stuff. So I feel like if it was somebody causing that, it would match this. Like if it was one of the guys that was the guy that was doing it, it would match the same exact frequency, or because you have no way of actually controlling that part of your voice.
Right, that's what they mean. It wasn't pre-recorded or re-recorded.
So it's really cool that they like brought even down to that, to where they were like, no, this is not what we are hearing from the hunter. And when I was even listening to it, I said to Nicole before, like, she didn't read me this, but I looked up and I was like, one almost sounds female and one sounds male. Like the very first creature sounds male,
100%.
and then you hear like the hunter kind of chip in, and then you almost hear this female voice, like just a higher, almost freaking, but nothing that we could recreate.
Right,
is going through. It was just so.
If I remember right, when the female voice kicked in, there was the male creature voice, then the human hiker, and then like the male creature almost started to say something, but the female creature almost like cut him off, like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe the human had accidentally antagonized the creature, and the creature was like, I'll fucking fight you, don't step on me. And the wife was like, dude, he doesn't even know what he's saying, so calm down.
Like, all right, first off,
and then
there's only me and you here, so what is this that's screaming back at us, You know,
we're gonna tear that shit apart if it does come, but for now, just chill.
That was, because, I mean, you're 7 foot tall, 7 to 8 foot tall.
It's insane. I mean, there are people that are that height, but...
What are you doing in the middle of the woods at late at night screaming banshee screams, though?
Right, are you from the Jungle Book? Yeah. But another little facts I have about those two guys is they also claim in the same spot that they've heard what sounds like a giant tuning fork in the sky above their heads, which I've actually watched numerous videos of weird sounds in the sky, so I believe that. They've heard car doors slam when obviously there's no cars around. And they said that they've also seen like little lights and like orbs in the air. So they're seeing some shit, they're hearing some shit, and they have at least one video to back up some of the shit they're claiming. So, I mean, that's insane to me. That's why I kind of wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
And then just the last part I have here before we close you guys out is just like, how, like, why could any of this stuff happen? So, like, there's a couple possible explanations that they went over, or, like, I found as I was researching. The first one is just kind of like folklore. So, Native American folklore, we all heard of it. We all know they have their stories. Usually, we don't, I feel like a lot of times we discredit them, which is really unfair, because I feel like they do have different knowledge than us.
Right.
I feel like anyone that lives a life different than us has different knowledge. Mm-hmm. Whether you're, I don't know,
I mean,
Australian,
even if you're living the same life now. I mean, like, me and you live such a different life, but yet we're living in the same time, you know? So it's like, me and you could experience something, but the way that we experience it could technically be a little differently, so when we tell our stories, it might seem a little different. But just because it got twisted a little bit doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Right. That's very true. So, a lot of Native American folklore, like, they talk about evil spirits and creatures and things like that, and they blame, a lot of crazy shit that happens on these things. So, in one case, there's something they call the Wendigo.
The Wendigo. Or
Wendigo.
Wendigo. Yes, I know.
Wendigo.
Yes, the Wendigo.
In Algonquin folklore.
Yep.
But that's said to be like a malevolent spirit or human-like creature that possesses human beings, and it apparently invokes feelings of greed and hunger. It gives you a desire to cannibalize other humans, and it gives you a desire to commit murder. So the reason I mentioned the tree lines earlier, and I think the opening, and like the fact that tree like above a certain point on the mountain, no life really grows, is because a lot of natives believe that you don't really go above that tree line on the mountain. Like, you only go above it if you have a certain, like, a special ceremony that needs to be done to communicate with forces up there, or like only certain, basically like really high status level people basically could go in there, or could go up there. And if you weren't one of those approved people, or it wasn't like a special ceremony kind of thing, there's a lot of bad ways you could die. Like, that's what they believed. They actually believed that at various points in time there are doors in the sides of the mountain that open up to another realm. So, I mean, again, it's folklore, but at the same time, I can't say that that's not what happens, because some of these people are legit disappearing.
Right.
And that does kind of work into my reason B, or my possible explanation B. And for this example here, like, I want you guys to think back on Dale Stelling. He was the guy that went missing at the Mesa Verde Park and was found 4.2 miles away from where he was last seen, and he went on that petroglyph trail. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you have him in your head now. When David Paulides was looking into his case, looking into Dale Stelling's case, he asked a rocket scientist, I think his name was Jonathan McNabb, I might be wrong on the first name, but he was a literal rocket scientist. And his father also came. He was actually like an engineer of some sort, I think it said, but he was like, he's pretty up there with rocket scientists. Like, these are credible guys with tons of education. He asked them up there because he wanted to analyze the science side of things to, see, is there some scientific explanation for what's happening, where this guy went, like, why is he not here? So one of the first things they do is an EMF test. And they actually find that in some spots there are higher EMF ratings than, the general area. So they end up setting up a laser light experiment. I don't know exactly how this works, but they had a catch point, which I'm assuming would catch the light, and they would measure the wavelengths between the locations, so between where the light started and the catch point. And they did this in, obviously, the normal reading areas and in the higher EMF areas. And when they did this, they found there was a 0.6% change in the measurement of time between the normal spots and the EMF heightened spots. They tested this a couple other ways to basically make sure that their results were legit and, wasn't just a fluke. And they confirmed the 0.6 change each time. So basically what they found was, as they were standing there, they could be standing in one spot, but if you put someone in the spots that are reading high EMFs, people in the high EMF spots would essentially age faster, which is insane to think.
Right.
And also, I think it was in this spot, under the cliff dwellings, or near the cliff dwellings, when they found large amounts of quartz. Quartz apparently can release EMF waves when it's under a lot of pressure also. Ooh. So, which also goes back to his profile points of the boulders. A lot of, like, if you have quartz rocks and stuff in there too, that could be something. But that was just two possible explanations I have. Obviously, there could be a million things that happened. Like, we're not saying that every single person went through a time-space continuum and is in some parallel universe. No.
Right.
It's possible. I mean, obviously, if he did go through it, he came back because we found his body. So they threw that bitch back.
Right.
And killed him.
They were like, we gotta research.
Or, like, bad specimen. Like, you can have him back, but they didn't realize that the travel, killed him. I don't know. But it could be, like Mikey's cases where, he had pointed out, there could be family, there could just be crazy things, there could be, I can't say there could be heart attacks, I have to imagine they check for things like that.
Right.
But, it could be anything. We don't know.
Right.
It's just insane that there's so many of these cases.
Right. I was just going to say is that I didn't want to get the number wrong. I know when I wrote it to you this morning, it might have been wrong, so I am just going to say the lower end. And I do believe they did say there was 1,400 missing children, in the woods that's unaccounted for, that doesn't really have So just to say, like, I gave you 3 out of, I mean, I could have given you 5 altogether,
Right.
but I gave you like 3 really good ones. Out of that number, there's got to be at least one of them that doesn't have any case of, or any way of showing that it was a family member or anything that literally just disappeared. And Nicole had a couple of them that literally did just go without a trace.
Someone tell me what happened to Aaron Hodges.
Yeah, that was crazy.
I need to know.
I mean,
that.
if you're watching this and you're out there, Aaron Hodges, hey, let someone know what's going
Isn't
on.
he dead? Didn't they find his body?
Did you say
sure
that?
They found his body. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they found him 9
Oh.
months late. Oh wait, that was his backpack.
Yeah,
Oh no, in 2016 they found his skull and his pelvis and his femur. So, I mean, he can't really be alive without his skull. So,
Yeah.
but I really wanted, like, where's the rest of him? What happened to his feet? Why are his feet
that's
not-
what it was. His
I
feet.
need
Where are
to
your
know
feet?
where the rest of him is and what happened to make this happen. Like,
Right.
I know that there's one spot, I see it on TV sometimes, or I've watched documentaries about it, but there's literally a civilization somewhere that, like, they don't like planes. If a plane drives by, they shoot bows and arrows at it. Like, they are the most primitive civilization. They, like, you know, they wear those little things around their waist just to block their things, and it doesn't really work.
Right.
Like, they're primitive, and they have no
loincloths.
interest. Yeah, they have no interest in advancing their society the way we have. So we basically, like, leave them alone. And, like, they'll kill people if you try to be a tourist. Like, they
That's
don't do it.
crazy.
They'll fuck you up. So,
Wow.
like, I know there's things like that exist, and I'm not saying that maybe there's a couple people like that don't exist in these national parks, and maybe they're doing some stuff. Because I did think about that, because Indians, if you think about how they used to kill buffalo,
Right.
they used every single part of it. Like, they were the most resourceful. I'm sorry, I said Indians. I should have said Native Americans. The Native Americans were the most resourceful when they killed buffalo. They used the fat, they used the bones, they used everything. So it's possible that there's someone out there, or like some groups in these deep forest things that maybe we're not seeing that are doing the same kind of thing, but I have no clue. Like, you guys have to let us know what you think could be causing these type of. You really think that all of them are
down
just
below.
like crazy things, like families involved in all of them, or they just accidentally fell into these search areas like
Right.
after?
After.
You have to let us know what you think, because this is insane to me, and to the person that recommended it, thanks for, piquing my curiosity.
Very awesome recommendation, I will say. It was obviously, out of every one that we've done so far, I had so much research because I actually had to tell Nicole, like, listen, I can't do the other 2 because I already have so much. Like, I loved it though, and
guys, keep recommending it because we
yes,
love it.
If you
obviously.
have anything, like I said, I now just got a Twitter, so I'm on Twitter. I mean, I have to still figure out how to work that in Instagram, but
I will post links to those. To
We're
both
on
of our
Facebook.
Twitters, both of our Twitters, our Facebook.
You can
And
comment
Mikey's Instagram.
on the YouTube video itself. Like, come on, people, show us a little bit of love.
Right.
We love you. Love us back.
We have a song of the week for you, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're just going to have to look in the description
Mhm.
and click the link. Check it out. Let us know what you think about everything. Our song of the week for you guys this week is going to actually be Yearbook by Hanson. I'll drop a link to it as we'll be doing from now on in the description. We kind of forgot to pick a song, not going to lie to you all, so I had to think about it while I was working on some editing, and that is the one that Mikey gave me the power to decide on. So I hope you all enjoy it. It's old school Hanson. Don't judge me. I'll always be a fan.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And that concludes another episode of Tainted Warriors. Bye.
Tainted Warriors, a TW Productions podcast.